Welcome to War Bios, the podcast where we delve into the complexities of military history's most pivotal battles. I'm your host, General Biography, and today we're going to explore one of the most fascinating conflicts of the 18th century, the Battle of Fontenoy. This iconic battle, fought on May 11, 1745, was a clash of empires, a test of military tactics, and a showcase for the bravery and cunning of some of history's greatest commanders. As we set the stage for our examination of this pivotal battle, let's travel back in time to the early 18th century, when the seeds of conflict were sown. The War of the Austrian Succession, a global conflict that drew in many of Europe's major powers, had been simmering since 1740. The Habsburg Empire, under the leadership of Maria Theresa, was facing challenges from Prussia, Bavaria, and Saxony, while Britain and France were engaged in a struggle for colonial supremacy. The complex interplay of alliances and rivalries created a volatile situation, with the region of Flanders at its center. In the summer of 1744, French forces under the command of Marshal Maurice de Saxe began to assemble along the border with Flanders, poised to strike at the heart of the Habsburg Empire. The town of Fontenoy itself was a small but strategically located village, surrounded by rolling hills, wooded areas, and scattered villages. The local population was predominantly Flemish, with strong cultural and economic ties to the nearby city of Tournai. As tensions escalated in the region, the villagers of Fontenoy found themselves caught in the middle of a maelstrom, with armies from both sides vying for control of the critical terrain. The French army, under the command of Marshal de Saxe, was a formidable force, with a reputation for discipline and tactical prowess. De Saxe, a seasoned military leader, had spent years studying the art of war and had developed innovative tactics that would give the French an edge on the battlefield. Meanwhile, the Austrian and British forces, led by Prince William of Cumberland, were determined to defend their territories and prevent French expansion. As the summer of 1744 wore on, the French army began to make its move, advancing into Flanders and capturing key towns and cities along the way. The Austrians and British responded with a series of counterattacks, but the French held firm, using their superior numbers and tactics to push the enemy back. By the autumn of 1744, the stage was set for a dramatic and bloody confrontation, one that would decide the fate of empires and shape the course of European history. The intricate dance of alliances and rivalries had created a powder keg of conflicting interests, with the region of Flanders at its center. The Dutch Republic, which controlled much of the region, was caught in the middle, trying to maintain its neutrality while facing pressure from both the French and the Austrians. As the war drums beat louder, the people of Flanders braced themselves for the worst, knowing that their homes and livelihoods were about to be torn apart by the conflict. As the two armies faced off on the rolling hills and wooded terrain surrounding Fontenoy, the stage was set for a dramatic and bloody confrontation. The French army, with its superior numbers and innovative tactics, was determined to break through the enemy lines and secure a decisive victory. Meanwhile, the Austrians and British were resolute in their defense of Flanders, knowing that the loss of this strategic region would have far-reaching consequences. The battle began with a series of skirmishes between French and Austrian cavalry units, as both sides jockeyed for position on the battlefield. The French infantry, meanwhile, formed up in dense columns, preparing to launch a massive assault on the enemy lines. De Saxe, a master tactician, had planned his attack carefully, using the terrain to his advantage and exploiting weaknesses in the Austrian and British defenses. As the French columns advanced, they were met with withering fire from the Austrian and British artillery, which had been strategically positioned to enfilade the French lines. Despite suffering heavy casualties, the French infantry pressed on, driven by their discipline and determination. The Austrians and British, meanwhile, held firm behind their defensive positions, but were slowly being pushed back by the relentless French onslaught. One of the most notable aspects of the Battle of Fontenoy was the heroic defense of the Austrian and British troops who fought valiantly against overwhelming odds. The bravery and sacrifice of these soldiers had become legendary in military history, with stories of individual acts of courage and selflessness inspiring generations of military leaders. As the battle raged on, de Saxe's tactics began to pay off, as the French columns broke through the enemy lines and poured into the gap. The Austrians and British were forced to retreat, leaving behind many of their wounded and dead. The French victory was complete, but at a high cost. Over 7,000 French soldiers had been killed or wounded in the battle, while the Austrians and British had suffered even heavier losses. In the aftermath of the battle, de Saxe would remark, "The Battle of Fontenoy was a masterpiece, but it was also a cruel one. I have seen the worst of war, and I fear that I shall never forget it." These words capture the essence of the Battle of Fontenoy, which was both a triumph of French arms and a testament to the horrors of war. In the immediate aftermath of the battle, the French army under Marshal Maurice de Saxe continued its campaign in Flanders, capturing key cities and fortresses from the Austrians and British. The victory at Fontenoy had given the French a significant advantage, allowing them to dictate the terms of the war. However, the heavy casualties suffered by both sides during the battle had taken a toll on the armies, and the war would eventually become a stalemate. The Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, signed in 1748, brought an end to the War of the Austrian Succession, but it did not entirely resolve the underlying issues that had led to the conflict. The treaty recognized Prussian control over Silesia, which had been a major point of contention between Austria and Prussia. However, it also failed to address the long-term consequences of the war, including the rise of Prussia as a major power in Europe. The Battle of Fontenoy had significant implications for the development of military tactics and strategy. De Saxe's innovative use of columns and artillery had proven effective on the battlefield, but it also highlighted the importance of defensive positions and the need for armies to adapt to changing circumstances. The battle also marked a turning point in the use of artillery, as the French deployment of cannons and howitzers had played a crucial role in breaking through the enemy lines. In the years following the Battle of Fontenoy, European armies began to adopt new tactics and strategies, reflecting the lessons learned from the conflict. The Prussians, under the leadership of Frederick the Great, developed a highly disciplined and mobile army that would go on to dominate European battlefields for decades. The Austrians and British also reformed their armies, placing greater emphasis on training, logistics, and adaptability. The legacy of the Battle of Fontenoy can be seen in the many military leaders who studied and emulated de Saxe's tactics. Napoleon Bonaparte, in particular, was influenced by de Saxe's use of columns and artillery, and he would go on to apply these principles with great success during his own military campaigns. The battle also had a lasting impact on the development of military theory, with many historians and strategists continuing to study and debate its significance. Today, the Battle of Fontenoy is remembered as a pivotal moment in European history, marking the beginning of a new era of warfare and diplomacy. The bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers who fought on both sides are still honored and commemorated, serving as a reminder of the human cost of conflict and the importance of striving for peace. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.